Hello, listeners. I'm Timstradamus, and it's Monday. And with me, as always, is my talented and beautiful co-hostess, Voyse.
Good morning, Timstradamus, and welcome to all those ghosts, goblins, ghouls, and more. This October, may your treats be many and your tricks be few.
All the tricks. Voyse and I enjoy reading and talking about stories from the internet that are interesting, funny, and dramatic. Because of our love of stories, we've come together and created this channel to share with you those experiences.
And hopefully give you some food for that.
Well, it looks like we have another shout out to make.
Yes, we got a new patron.
Jessica Barnhart.
Welcome to the Tea Club.
Thank you so much, and we appreciate you.
And all of your support.
Before we get into the stories, what did you brew this morning?
So this morning I brewed for you some green tea. Oh no. I added some cinnamon, ginger, and allspice. And let's see what you think of this one.
Oh, okay. I don't taste the green tea. This is really good.
You like it?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's definitely 4 out of 5.
All right.
Yeah.
I got one green tea that you like. Let's get right into these stories then. For any listeners wanting to follow along, all story links are in the description below. For our first story, am I the a-hole for reneging my promise to pay for my daughter's wedding? I'll try to keep it short. I have 3 children, Daniel, Rebecca, and Ava. Daniel and Rebecca are married, and Ava recently got engaged. Long ago, when my wife and her mother died, I made my children a promise that I would pay for their wedding no matter the cost. And while I didn't explicitly state it, the one implicit condition I had was that the wedding be organized close to our city where we all live. For no particular reason other than logistics, David organized his wedding on a ranch that was only a 3-hour drive away, Rebecca in the city. Now that Ava is engaged, she said they're thinking of organizing the wedding over in Europe, France or Italy. I told Ava I am not willing to pay for such an expensive wedding that would require most everyone to take a transatlantic flight just to take another one back the day after. She got mad, said I'd be an a-hole reneging on my promise, that David and Rebecca got their wedding paid for, so why can't she? I can afford it anyway, so why not? I suggested they organize the wedding somewhere closer, and then they go for the honeymoon, which will be paid for by me and the groom's family, to Europe, but she refused. Part of me feels like she is right, and I am going back on my word, but part of me finds it ridiculous to have to fly to Europe for my daughter's wedding. Am I the a-hole?
Okay. A nice story to get us going into Monday. So let me ask this because I want to clarify. Does ROP say that when he made this agreement with his 3 children initially, that it also included that back half that he put in there, which was that the wedding had to be close?
No. So while he says, I didn't explicitly state it, he says one implicit condition that I had was that the wedding be organized close to the city. But unfortunately, his actual promise, and he actually words it, is that I would pay for their wedding no matter the cost.
And that is what I wanted to make sure, because that is a very important detail. Now he says, though, 2 of his other children, when they got married, they were close by.
Correct.
One was a little bit out of the city, 3 hours, and the other one was in the city. So it sounds like the first 2 listened to some type of reasoning because, look, weddings are expensive, very expensive. And depending on where the venue's at and how far people have to travel versus where the family actually resides, there's so many things you have to take into account. And it sounds like the first 2 children did that. Now, where the problem happens here is because the father kind of got away with that with the first 2 children, he kind of expected for his 3rd one to go along with this new stipulation that got put in after a promise was reached long ago. That's unfair. In my opinion, everybody's the a-hole in this situation. The father did make a promise that he would pay for it regardless of price. On the other end, the daughter would be the a-hole as well because she's not seeing any type of reasoning here. Your entire wedding is being paid for. And if I heard it correctly, it's not just the wedding. It's the honeymoon.
Correct.
I think you need to take a step back and realize that it's not just about you. Yes, it is your wedding. But if it's being paid for in that way by your parents, you really should at least meet them in the middle
So the consensus on this was really split. Some were saying that he's not the a-hole, and his daughter sounded really greedy, that the amount of money that you'd spend to have an international wedding is ridiculously expensive. On top of that, you had the other half of the commenters who were saying our OP is definitely the a-hole because you made a promise, and you shouldn't make a promise that you can't keep. You paid for 2 of the other weddings. She should be treated no differently. Now, let me make an analogy. I view this as no different than a parent offering to purchase a car. And you're being offered to have that car paid for, but there's a difference between buying a car that you can use and buying the most exorbitant car out there that no parent can afford. I kind of view this as no different. Now, I think one way that they could compromise, which I kind of agreed with one commenter that I came across, was take the most expensive wedding between the 2 children that you already had, the amount of money that you put towards that wedding, and give that to her as her funding for her wedding. In that way, you're not gypping her anything any less. You're also not, in a way, playing favorites by paying for any more. Otherwise, there should have been something that should have also been offered to the other 2.
I can agree with that. I mean, I guess if you're just going to do that, might as well just pay out exactly what you paid for the highest.
Correct.
That way there's like 0. Because if you go in the middle, I can see where someone will be having problems with that. But I would just match the one that got the highest and just move on if that was really the promise we made. But that still even goes beyond the promise, though. He didn't say I'm going to match the highest of the weddings as it goes on. It's I'm going to pay for your wedding regardless of the price.
I would say, at least in this way, it would be more of a compromise than it would be saying just no. And then in that way, she would be having to look at and work through the constraints of any other wedding, which has its own constraints.
You got to plan accordingly.
Well, let's go ahead and go to our next story and see about our standards. Am I the a-hole for suggesting my wife lower her standards so that she'll be less overwhelmed? My wife, 37 female, and I, 38 male, have 3 kids, 12, 10, and 8. She is in a constant state of overwhelm and very easily irritated, constantly complaining how it's all too much. I'm, of course, happy to help and do my fair share for the kids or household, but it's never enough because her standards are too damn high. She insists one of us has to be up at 6:45 every morning to make sure the kids are ready and make the bus, which comes at 7:45. I told her they're old enough to not need that much help already. They can all dress themselves and pour themselves cereal and milk. There's no reason we have to be up. She says that cereal isn't a good enough breakfast. They need something more substantial, especially the 12-year-old, and that the 10-year-old has ADHD and will definitely struggle without help in the morning. And anyway, she wants to see them off and kiss them goodbye for the day. So she gets up. I don't. Then she gets upset that I never give her a morning off when all she needs to do is take the morning off when she wants and let the kids handle themselves. Also, she is super strict about screen time during the week and is exhausted and snappy from arguing about it with the kids and upset I don't support her strict limit of 2 hours a day. I say as long as homework is done, why not until bed? She says it's not healthy for them. They need to play outside or with games and toys, read some books, just entertain themselves in more ways than one. I agree. They should enjoy other things, but not seeing why we have to make such a rigid limit. She also likes to get out on the weekends and do stuff like zoos, museums, etc., but then complains about the planning for the outing and how grouchy the youngest gets by the end of it. And again, I say, let's just chill at home and voila, you've cut the work. I'm an engaged and active parent. I'm not trying to get out of it. But I don't think I should have to help my wife dig herself out of her own self-created holes. She creates the stress for herself and then turns to me to alleviate it, which I think is unfair. Am I the a-hole for telling her she needs to do less and then she won't need this level of help?
Well, this is a bit of a snafu. Let me see if I understand the facts. ROP says that they have 3 kids together, all under the age of 12. His wife right now is complaining a lot that she's having to hold up a lot of the social aspect of their life when it comes to the household and their children. He says that she has a very strict way of running the house. Kids need to be up at a certain time, they need to be eating a certain thing before school, and then they need to be out. He's saying that they're old enough, they should be doing it on their own and not having the assistance. The mother is saying, because I think one of their children has ADHD.
Correct. The middle child.
And the other one is 8.
Correct.
You know, you can raise your kids the way you want. You can have the rules you want. It is your home. As long as it's not negatively impacting someone, normally I really don't care how people run their households. I feel the same way with this. Yeah, she may be a little more strict than, let's say, our parenting, but that doesn't make it bad. The thing that makes this story bad is he alludes to something about the time spent on video games or in front of a screen.
Yes, he calls it their screen time.
Okay. And he says it's about, I think, 2 hours a day, and that the mother has to bend over backwards to enforce this rule with her kids. Now, she's only having to do that because it sounds like the OP in our situation, their father, is not helping to enforce this rule. Because I guarantee you, had both parents been on the same side, you're not having that problem every day. It kind of sounds like he's undermining that rule and others. And that's going to start creating the problems that they do have right now. Regardless of what rules you do make, you have to be on the same page. And if you can't be on that same page, then you need to have a conversation between the both of you. So that way you're not putting the other parent in that type of situation.
Agreed.
He also says at the end, he's an engaged and active parent. Everything you've said in this story leads me to believe you are not. You say that your wife is the one that's been planning all the trips, that she's making sure the kids are engaged and happy and doing things that you should be doing instead of just sitting in front of a screen. The way he makes it sound is we should just be letting them do that, period, without any type of restriction. We don't think that that's healthy at all.
No, I don't think it is.
He's just simply going, I want to take the lazy way out. We have screens, put them in front of them. And if you don't want to deal with the 8-year-old having a temper tantrum, then we just don't go to the zoo or to the museums and stuff like that. How does that make you an engaging and present parent?
It doesn't.
Okay. That's why, OP, you are the a-hole, because you're not seeing it. And you're making life harder for your wife. Get on the same page.
Well, the consensus was our OP is definitely the a-hole. In fact, it came down as simple as this. Your wife is asking for your help and you're not giving it. That's the short form of it. All the reasoning in between, I would say some of the commenters got a little snippy, but understandably, when someone's trying to claim that they're one thing, but their words and how they're explaining it shows another, kind of shows how two-faced you are.
Hopefully he was able to take some of that criticism and be a better partner.
I hope so too. Well, let's go into our next story and see what's happening in this relationship. Am I the a-hole for wanting a divorce because my wife doesn't want her son to be legally mine? I've been in her son's life for the past 4 years, since he was 2. He already calls me dad. All that's left is to make it legal, but my wife thinks that decision to make it legal should be up to her son, but wants to wait till he is old enough to make that decision, which I think is completely silly, right? She also doesn't want any more kids, which I've come to terms with. I'm at a loss now. I don't know what to do. I also heard from her friend she doesn't want to make it legal because if we divorce, she doesn't want to have to fight me for custody. Edit. She changed her mind about wanting more kids because of her career. I accepted it and we compromised on letting me adopt him, but now she's stalling. The bio dad has never been in the picture. She doesn't even know who he is. Am I the a-hole?
This is a bollocks of a story. So let's talk about it. ROP says that he has a kid with his wife, but the child isn't his. Not biologically, anyway.
Correct.
He's been in the child's life since he was 2. I guess this is 4 years into the future, so the kid's now 6. Now he tells us that his wife no longer wants any more children, and they kind of compromised on the whole situation he was going to adopt the 6-year-old legally. Now, I guess between that agreement and now, the wife has, in his words, been stalling on the adoption. And I think, unfortunately, he finds out through a friend that the only reason why she's stalling is because she's afraid that if they get a divorce, that he's going to have any type of claim to their child. I'm kind of shocked that you would agree to something as big as that. And then now that it's becoming something ROP actually wants, she's completely pulling back on this situation. Even though that was the agreement they reached, so that way he would feel better about not having any children of his own. Biologically, anyway. In my opinion, ROP is definitely not the a-hole. I don't know why it is that she's more worried about a divorce looming over just having everyone be happy.
That's a valid question.
I wonder if he's able to flesh that out for us a little bit. If there have been problems that have cropped up and now she's having different feelings about that. But you definitely owe it to your partner to have that conversation with him because he sounds very hurt by this.
Well, let me go ahead and give you the consensus on Reddit and provide you a little bit more information. So the consensus on Reddit is not the a-hole. And there's, I think, a lot of details in the comment section regarding their relationship. Now, our OP has put in the comment section that he doesn't ever think that she's going to let him adopt their child. He believes that she is essentially just using him for childcare while her career takes off. And they've apparently had close friends that seem to believe the same thing. Now, let me go ahead and give you a consensus on Reddit as to why they put down not the a-hole. ROP has made it clear in the comment section when they got together, he thought that they were going to have kids together, more children. And he, of course, loves his son that he has now, but in his mind, he thought that they were going to continue to grow their family. So this understanding between them when they got together changed when her career started to take off. And now she's been traveling more for work than actually being at home. He has been the one to spend more time with their son. A lot of Redditors find this to be, yes, you can have your shifting values, but to have such a big thing in someone's life be taken away in a way where all the feelings and the time has already been invested into this relationship, to say that our OP wants to leave so that he can go ahead and start a family, I don't feel like that is this individual's feeling. Based on how he talks, at least in the comment section, is her priority regarding their entire relationship has changed and she's no longer emotionally invested into it. So much so that her choices in life has deviated away from what used to be shared priorities between the two of them. And unfortunately, if this continues, I imagine it more than likely will become a divorce. And that's something that, as you stated, seems to be more on the forefront of her mind if that's something that she's afraid of. I think it's very telling. As I've said, there's a lot in the comments section that he actually provided us with. One of them, he actually says she made it clear that if anything happens to her, their child would be going to one of the sisters. It wouldn't be staying with him. He's 6 now. Our OP says that his son does want him to be adopted and for them to actually have custodial rights as well. Now, don't get me wrong, a 6-year-old doesn't understand custodial rights, but I can understand it in the way of ROP wants to be sure that should anything happen to their relationship between him and his wife, that his relationship with him and his son is still secured and safe. Well, let me go ahead and provide you with an update he put in his post. He said, she has agreed to let me be the legal guardian in case anything happens to her, and we will continue to wait till he is old enough to decide if he wants to be adopted. This is not what I want, but I'm willing to compromise. Thank you all for your comments. I will go ahead and suggest that our OP look in his states to see if there's any rights that he could have if him and his wife do decide to divorce, that he has some sort of visitation with his son Because while his wife might not feel that that relationship is important to her, that doesn't mean that the court system won't find that relationship important for him and his son.
I can agree with that. They definitely have some stuff to work on, though.
Oh, definitely. Well, that relationship is a little rocky. Unfortunately, we're going through shaky waters in our next one. For our last story. Am I the a-hole for going on vacation without my husband? My husband, 32 male, and I, 29 female, planned a week vacation to New Orleans in the U.S. We, but mostly I, have been planning this for months. Back in March, I told him I would plan most of it, where to go and what to do. All he has to do is make sure he had the week off and buy the plane tickets. I spent the last few months researching what to do. I booked the hotel room, made reservations at places we wanted to try. I made a list of all the sites I wanted to see. Every few weeks, I would check in with my husband to see if he had asked off and bought the tickets yet. He would say he was waiting for the plane ticket prices to go down. 3 weeks ago, I reminded him again, and he said he had got off of work for the days, but had forgotten to get the tickets. He looked online, and the tickets were close to $1,500 per ticket. He said he was going to wait some more to see if they would go down. Last week, I asked if he had bought them yet, and he said no. We looked again, and the prices were still high. He said he wasn't willing to spend that much on them, and asked how much money I would lose if I just canceled everything instead. He offered to have a nice staycation instead. I told him I was not willing to cancel everything because I spent so much time planning it. We argued, and we didn't come to a conclusion. I wound up buying just one ticket for myself, and when I flew out on Saturday, I told him I was still going, and he acted all surprised that I didn't want to stay home with him. I am in New Orleans now, and he is blowing up my phone saying that I am an a-hole for still going without him. He was trying to get a ticket to come too, but I told him if he came, he is getting his own hotel room because this is now my vacation away from him. Am I the a-hole?
Excellent story. So this one's a cool one. I like that this is the last story you picked. OP is 29 and her husband is in his 30s.
32.
Okay. She says they planned this out about 4 months in advance. She has all the itinerary planned out. She tells her husband that all he's got to do, 2 things. Make sure you get the week off for the trip and buy the plane tickets. We've had to buy plane tickets before. It never gets cheaper the closer it gets to the date.
That's so true.
But he keeps thinking that some reason it will just become cheaper if you just wait. Now, don't get me wrong. Maybe there's some deals he knows about that I don't. But from our experiences, that's not how buying tickets works, especially on airplanes. I guess a couple weeks before the trip, she finally asked him one more time. And he's like, oh, I'm not willing to pay for something that we've talked about we're going to do 4 months ago. And by the way, how about we have a staycation instead? That sound good?
No.
So I can imagine why. In that moment, I would feel very hurt. ROP sounds like she put a lot of thought and effort into this. She looks at him, dumbfounded, because I'm certain most people would, and tells him, no, I'm going to go. You can stay home. Enjoy your staycation. I don't see there being any problem with that. Now, apparently he was motivated enough after she leaves, though, and she arrives in New Orleans, because she's penning this letter in New Orleans. Good for you, OP. But now all of a sudden, husband wants to tag along. And then she gives him the final chef's kiss. You can come. I can't stop you from coming to New Orleans. I don't own New Orleans. But if you come here, you're not going to enjoy any of this with me. You get your own hotel. You f***ed around and found out.
That's very true.
That's what it is. I'm not upset with any of that story. OP, I hoped you enjoyed the rest of your vacation in New Orleans.
I hope so as well. And so do all the other Redditors, because their consensus is not the a-hole. Let me go ahead and provide 2 viewpoints from the Redditors as to why this is. 1, so apparently our OP's husband didn't want to go. He didn't want to go so much that he sabotaged this whole thing, or they just didn't want to spend the money for the tickets at all. And maybe they were hoping that she would also pick up that tab. Either it's weaponized incompetence on his part, or it's sabotage. Regardless, both of them are bad. But I find it funny that once she goes, apparently he can't afford these tickets. And now, guess what? He does want to go. Unfortunately, this falls down to the, as you've said it, f*** around and find out.
He did.
And he lost.
He's going to learn a lesson, though. It sounds like his wife, when she plans things, is not one of those people that's going to let them just fall aside for other people. Understand that about your wife. When there's plans, you do them, especially when you've talked about them. And if it's something that you don't want to do, tell her that immediately, so that way she's not sitting there idling and waiting, because I'm certain had they bought them 4 months ago, she would have still gotten less than what it was that she paid for a couple weeks before the trip.
Oh, definitely. If anything, if it's a trip that he wasn't interested in going on, let her have her plans with some friends to go then. It's a lot better than feeling like the only one that's going to really enjoy this trip would have been just her.
I can just hope that they're going to be able to work through it. And it's something they probably need to go get some type of counseling on, because it sounds like you wouldn't be pushed into that type of reaction if this isn't something that you're already used to with a partner.
That is very insightful. Yes, I would agree with that. Generally, if something falls through when it comes to planning, parties are very understanding, at least in good relationships, that you have to reschedule and refix and make things flexible. But if she continued to go through, and apparently they had an argument where, in her words, there was no conclusion, they're not seeing eye to eye with what's important with each other. Or more like she's making it clear what's important for her, and he just doesn't want to accept that.
Yeah. Don't live around other people's incompetence is basically what this story comes down to.
Well, I hope she has an amazing time in New Orleans.
There's a lot to do in New Orleans. Was that our last story?
That was our last story.
Fun one to end off on.
Yes.
Well, as our stories come to a close, don't forget, you've seen the world what you carry in your heart.
If you have enjoyed listening to us read and talk about today's stories, please rate, subscribe, or follow, and turn on notifications for new content. We regularly post on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. We'd like to give a huge thank you to all of our patrons. Your support is really appreciated.
We look forward to hearing your opinions in the comments below.
And now, as we head into October, I'd love to hear what spooky plans you all have.
I'm going to go look for the Halloween Skittles. They are my favorite.
Oh, yes. He hunts for them every year.
And remember, if you post it, maybe I'll find those Skittles.